Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Have you ever seen somebody getting ready to come up and preach to bring something with them like this? Just call me a sissy. I can tell you that it depends upon what I'm preaching on to how I'm feeling and how I might start crying. And thank you. So, unfortunately, today could be one of those days. And the reason is this is not a typical sermon. I've had this sermon in my back pocket for a year for this particular instance. And what's happening today? Elder Sykes is sick. So therefore, I talked to him last night. I said, look, I'll fill in for you. And so this is different. This is not necessarily like one of his sermons. I don't know if he's given a sermon about his life or not yet. Has he done that, Sister Chandra? Years ago. So I don't know how long this is going to take because I didn't have time to practice it really. So I'll be paying attention. We're 3:30 now, so I won't go past 6:30, okay? Okay. So, look, God is good. And he's been especially good to me. And you'll see when I finish the sermon what I'm talking about. Because in some ways you don't want to be me, and in some ways you do. Okay, so the things that I've gone through in the past, and of course we're all going to have to go through things in the future, aren't we? Very tough things. And these aren't, some of these may be similar to what's coming. Because there's life and death situations here that I'm going to explain to you that I've been in before. So, the title of the sermon is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Anybody ever heard that title before? Now, so I've been all of these. And probably you have too. Right? So, I'm going to say a little prayer here and then we're going to begin. Can you bow your heads? Heavenly Father, we ask you this morning for the Holy Spirit, for your goodness and mercy and long suffering to each of us. And I pray, dear God, that you will bless this testimony today and that you will bless the others that listen to it. So help us now in the name of Jesus. Amen. So this is going to start out a little bit tough. You might not even like the words I'm going to say. Okay? And I wouldn't say starting out, it may go down about 5 or 10 minutes, and then it gets tougher. Okay, so I lived in southeastern Ohio growing up, and my parents were at the poverty level. And so I remember I got an allowance once a week. What would you guess it would be? I'm sorry? 3 cents. Come on, Paul. No, it's true. I got 3 cents. So with 3 cents, I went to a public school for the first 10 years. And so for 3 cents, I could go to the milk machine, put in 3 pennies and get a milk out. And I was really excited. There wasn't a lot to get excited about in southern Ohio. I should say southeastern Ohio. Kind of a depressed area. But you know, when you're a kid, you don't realize that other people might say you've got it bad, do you? You're just used to it. And so you got what you got. I know somebody that I used to be friends with and worked with me for years in my dental office said, you get what you get, so don't pitch a fit. There's some truth to that, isn't there? So, oh, I didn't realize it was up there yet. Okay, so there's one more picture. Will that come up later after this one? The other one was a video? Okay. It was? Okay. Anyhow, yeah, so I'll get to that. I'll get to that in just a minute here. But, yeah, somebody's up there on the screen, this little kid, and he's got this dog named Ernie. Ernie. And he's probably about 5 years old here. And that's the house I lived in for a while until it disappeared. So, now some other pictures I wanted to show you. I've been able to do that. So my parents, I told you, were poor. They were at the poverty line. They both worked. And I was unsupervised most of the time. Is that a good thing? No, that's not a good thing, folks. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but, you know, you become more of a bad boy when you're unsupervised, right? In other words, I raised myself. My mother worked 3 to 11 shift in a nursing home. And my father, who only had an 8th grade education, worked in a factory. And his job was from 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. 4 a.m. Yeah, he had to be there at the factory, first one there and so forth, to crank up the heating system and so forth. I went to public school, which was about an hour from my house. I was actually right at the end of the county, so they picked me up first, and I had to ride the bus for an hour while they picked everybody else. And then the opposite was true when I went home. They let everybody off first, and I got to be let off last. At the end of the 1st grade, tragedy struck. And we lost everything. You see that structure up there? It was burned to the ground with nothing taken from it. The bad news is my parents had 0 insurance. So everything was lost. I'm going to fast forward to age 16. Do people get in trouble around that age usually? Well, I tell you, I was no exception. I was getting ready to go to the academy, actually. There's an academy called Mount Vernon Academy. Has anybody heard of that here? Yeah. So that's in outside of the capital, which is Columbus. It's about an hour outside of that. So I'm getting ready to go there in a couple months. So I had some non-SDA friends. Not that it's bad if you're a non-SDA. And they lived about 2 miles from me. And they set me up with this girl. I'd never had a date before. So I didn't even know who she was. I'd never met her before. So after greeting her at this other person's house, and his mother had left his father years before, and so his father was traveling all the time, so he was there by himself, and this person was actually married at 16 because his girlfriend got pregnant and she was pregnant at the time. So anyhow, so they invited this girl over. All I knew is her name was Helen. And after greeting her, she went into the bathroom. She went into the bathroom. And when she came out, she didn't have any clothes on. So, I'm not going to go into any detail there. You might can guess for a 16-year-old male, then even though that might be a shock, you're going to partake. So, but you could still say no, and that didn't happen to me. Trouble had found me, and I didn't say no. So 2 months later, I was a student in Mount Vernon Academy. Okay? And by the way, where we lived was in the country. Let me tell you something I've learned about country girls. You better beware. Also, the city girls as well. But, you know, these were country girls, and, you know, and they're probably not churched and blah, 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 and didn't have any parental coverage either. So, anyhow, so I went to the academy for my junior and senior year and of high school. So at graduation, I don't remember when that's going to come up here. Anyhow, at graduating from Mount Vernon Academy, I was in a class of 100. And guess how many said they were going to college? What percentage? What? 10? 99 out of 100 said they were going to college. So, you know, that's one of the good things about Adventist schools. Typically, education is a big deal. I've never seen such strictness in my entire life, though. That's all I got to say. I mean, I may not have had a mother and father that looked after me, but let me tell you, all the principals and whoever the staff was there, you couldn't even breathe without getting in trouble. Of course, I needed that kind of whatever you want to call it. So when graduation came, I had to decide what I was going to do. I really didn't have any ambition for myself. That may seem kind of strange, isn't it? Because you know I'm a doctor of dental surgery. So how do you get there if you have zero ambition? Well, I was 16 when I went, but about 18 when I graduated. So really, because of going to a Christian school like that, it helped that all the rest of the kids were going. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to college too. Okay, again, I don't have any ambition on my own at that point, and my parents didn't give me any. So, so when you get there, you have to take a major. And I started out with a major of medical technology. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. Probably some of the nurses here do. But, you know, you work in a lab and so forth, and, you know, you don't make a bad living. It's not excellent. And then I realized the courses were extremely hard. I mean, the chemistry was unbelievable. So I switched quickly There's something easier, pre-dental. I'm not kidding. The chemistries were easier and so forth. So, hey, all of a sudden I decided I'm going to become a dentist. It's better than medical technology, is what I'm going to say. So, anyhow, so this school I went to was called Columbia Union College. It's in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Did I already say that? Anyhow, so that's the school that I went to. And matter of fact, I went there with the president of the GC. Who is that? Yeah, Ted Wilson. I think we were in the same class. Now, I never really talked to him because I had a tough schedule. Remember, my parents have no money. What does that mean I have to do? Okay, I didn't say this, but in academy, I worked 30 hours a week and went to school. This is not a joke. This is like your parents telling you they walked a mile in the snow to get to school or something. But this is true. So in college, I worked 40 hours a week and went to school full time. Now that's hard to do. I wasn't studying a lot, but I studied when I could. And so my grades weren't awesome, but they were decent. Just to give you an example, I ended up graduating with about a 3.0. Well, a 3.0 today won't get you anywhere. So I'm trying to go to professional school with a 3.0. Is that going to work? Back then it would. It would. Now this is why. This is why. People of color, I don't know, there may be a couple in our class out of 128 doctors. I'm not sure what it was. I wasn't paying attention to that. And the ladies in my class, how many fingers are holding up? There were 3 ladies out of 128. Do you know what there is today? They're mostly ladies. So that helped me because at that time, the ladies hadn't figured out that dentistry might be a good job for them. And so I was able to get an interview and sneak my way in. I won't go through all that happened because y'all would make me stop talking right now. But anyhow, let me go back to the college part before dental school here now, okay? So at college, I did date a couple girls in the academy. Unfortunately, they were more pure than the first ones I had met. But in college, it's kind of hard to date when you're working 40 hours a week and you're going to school full time. But so I found this girl, her name was Susie. Susie Applegate was her name. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous. Okay. I like that. No, I'm not kidding. As a matter of fact, later on, the person who would later become my wife, Susan Kelly, told me something about this girl. She said, "She's too good looking for you." And she was right. So this girl was beautiful, but she had issues. Boys. Every boy she slept with. You can figure that one out, right? So I'm dating that girl. I don't know. It just seems like the girls I've known in my life are so aggressive. It's unbelievable. Whereas the real humble Christian girls. I would meet one pretty soon, though. So anyhow, I dated 3 girls in a row that were kind of somewhat the same. They were all 5'1". They were all blonde, and they were all beautiful. Lucky me, huh? Now, the issue was 2 of these girls were like the first girls I met back in Ohio. And you may think that's a good thing, but if you're looking for a mate, that's not what you're looking for. So I dated this girl, Susie, for, 6 months to a year. But see, God was looking out for me. I couldn't get away from this girl. But he gave this girl's mother an idea. I'm going to send her to La Sierra in California. What did that do? Took her away from me, right? Did I need her taken away? Yeah. Did I want her taken away? No. But so it was a situation that you'll see that God was into, even though I wrote this. I've only written one letter in my life. It was to this girl when she left, telling her how much I loved her and all that kind of stuff. But interestingly enough, somebody else read that letter. This girl's roommate in La Sierra. And guess what happens? She shows up on the campus of Columbia Union College. Well, she had read that. She had to, by the way, things that she acted and did. So I did not know what to think. I'm guessing she had talked with her roommate, and of course, things were going on with me and her roommate before she left and so forth, and so she probably talked to her about that. So anyhow, this girl singled me out. Yeah. So I might be getting off where I'm supposed to be here. Hold on, let me look. So the first girl I dated for about 6 months or so, that was Susie when she moved to California, right? And I wrote her a letter and didn't get any response, blah, blah, blah. So when this other girl came, some of the things I probably shouldn't tell you, she came to my dorm room. I'm keeping it clean. She wanted a pair of my jeans. This is no joke. You think this is kind of a setup for me? She wanted a pair of jeans. So I said, okay. So she went to my dorm room. She's not even supposed to be in there, right? And so she's trying on a pair of my jeans. And how do you do that? You take off your clothes. Okay? Yeah, so I'm getting kind of set up here again, but nothing happened. She liked my jeans, snuck out the back door, and that was the name of that tune. So I kind of hung out with her a little bit, but I tell you, it was a total mistake. You know why? I'd been dating the lady I was going to marry for a year. So what am I doing? I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm setting myself up for disaster. I can't be hanging around this girl when the girl that I've been dating for a year is the one I want to marry. We even talked about marriage and so forth. But sometimes beautiful women are difficult. And so anyhow, one evening, she wasn't staying in the girls' dorm though, so it was a little bit more. A girls' dorm even in college is like a prison. I mean, you can't get in there as a guy and run up to the girls' room and so forth. But she was staying in something called an annex or something, and so anyhow, I was in the lobby with her and kissing on her. Okay? Chandra's looking like, what's he going to say next? And so she leaned over to me and said something. Come up to my room and spend the night. This is at CUC. But it's not at the girls' dorm. It's an annex type situation. So you could sneak up to her room if you wanted to. But when I heard that, I just about had a heart attack because I knew what that meant. If I go up here with this girl, now I was 100% honest with the girl I was going to marry. If I fell there and went up to spend the night with this girl, I was going to tell Susan Kelly. And what was Susan Kelly had done? She was dumping me in a heartbeat. So I knew that. So within a couple of seconds, I had to decide what to do. So my whole life is going to be different if I go one way than the other. So probably seemed like an eternity to her, but I kind of turned away from her as I was thinking. And I realized I can't do this. And it wasn't Jesus I was thinking of, although I think the Holy Spirit was working on me. This is a Joseph situation, really. So I told her no. I can't go up to the room with you. And it all had to do with Susan Kelly, who some of you have met before. Deborah has. Did anybody meet my wife? Okay, several. Jason, okay. Several of you met my wife. So anyhow, wow. That's the second best decision I've ever made in my life. Because I never saw this girl again. And I don't even know why she was there to begin with. But I'm just glad that I had been dating Susan Kelly for a period of time, and I knew she was going to make a perfect wife. So luckily, and I believe the Holy Spirit was helping me there, I made a good decision. So, let me see where I am here. Oh my, I'm getting away with time here. So, in about 1 year from there, that time frame, I got married to Susan Kelly. Now, just after that, I made some bad decisions. They weren't about girls. Because God came to me and He said, I want you first in my life. And I said, no. There's a place in the Bible that talks about a man wants to get married, have children. I forget what book that's in and what chapter. But he was making a kind of excuses, like me. So I'm making a lot of excuses to God. Say, God, I can't do this. I got to go to dental school. I want to have children. And I can't have you burdening me down. So I said something to God. I'll come to you in 20 years. That was 1970. 20 years is 1990, right? Is that a wise thing to say? No, it's not. So when you do things like this, there's hell to pay. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not going to go into exactly what that is for me, but it's what do the children see in your house when you don't have Jesus in your heart? You think they can't see that? So, I told God I would come to him in 1990. So in the meantime, I went to dental school. And of all things, my wife got pregnant 3 times. On birth control every time. This girl is the most fertile girl in the world. I'm convinced of it. So anyhow, the first baby is my son. He's an attorney. He lives in Alpharetta now. And sometimes he comes to these things, but he was not invited today. I did not invite any of my relatives. Why? Because I'm spilling my guts and I don't want them to know it. Because they'll hold that against me. You get it? So I didn't invite any friends. I didn't invite any family. So you guys are my friends and family today, okay? So, anyhow, I forget where my train of thought was, but, we're in dental school. So one of those babies did not make it. So one of those babies died just before childbirth. It was a full-term pregnancy that my wife had. She had 3 pregnancies right in a row. Boom, boom, boom. So our plans was to have children after we were out of dental school. I think those plans got wrecked some, right? So anyhow, my son was born first, the gentleman that's an attorney, and then the stillborn baby came next, and then my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and she delivered, dental school got out in 1975 in May, and she delivered in August. So our third child was born in Georgia because I left Maryland because her parents lived in Marietta, Georgia. And the last place I wanted to live was Ohio. I'm not saying it's a bad state, but compared to Marietta, Georgia, it's light years ahead. And if you're going to set up a business, Marietta, Georgia was a good place to do that. Okay. We actually lived with her parents for 1.5 years. And her dad traveled a lot and so forth. So I started my dental business. I got there in July of 1975 after graduating dental school and drove a U-Haul truck down there with the little belongings that we had and so forth. And I started looking for money. Not on the ground. From the banks. What did I need money for? To start my business. Guess what? I couldn't hardly find anybody who would loan me a dime because I didn't have any collateral. 0. My parents were broke. Her parents didn't have the collateral. I wouldn't ask them to sign anyway. So I'm looking. It took me about 3 months of going back and forth between banks and finance companies, and I found this one individual. I think his name was Ed Malkey. And they could make a decision without a committee. So if you got a committee of 5 or 10 people, you're going to get voted down nearly every time. But there were 2 people that voted here in this situation. So they said, yeah, we'll give you the money. About jumped out of my skin. So as soon as I got the money, I was also working part-time while I was waiting in Atlanta for the public health department. So I was making a little money that way. So anyhow, I started doing a building. You can't just do your own freestanding building. What you do is, like we would have to do if you go to a shopping center, so I don't like this, you've got to rent the space, and then you got to renovate it. So you got double cost here. And so I didn't really have any choice. Now, not very many students nowadays go out on practice on their own straight out of school because it's so hard to do money-wise, unless your parents have some money. Well, my parents had zero money, so that wasn't going to work. So anyhow, so I started a business, and actually we started building, let me try to think when it was. We started building in the fall of 1975, and by February something, we opened. So it was a small business, obviously. Later, I would open a business with 10 rooms, just for dental patients, not including people upstairs and lunch area and all that kind of stuff. So you have to start small because you don't have a lot of money to do it. So we started small, and it worked pretty good. I did some advertising. I was in the forefront of dentists and people that were advertising back at that time, which was, like I said, 1975, 76, 77. And I did quite well with it, believe it or not. I got great patients, and you didn't have to offer them $1 million to come in and be a patient. So, I would offer a free cleaning or whatever the case may be. So anyhow, it worked real good. And so I did that, but something else, let's see if I can find out what this is here. All right, I don't see where I've written this down, but, oh yeah, here it is. So anyhow, so I went along a couple of years. It's kind of slow going to begin with. I mean, you're just throwing your name out there and, your shingle, so to speak, and you're waiting for people to come. So it's kind of difficult. So one day, my father-in-law called me, and he was third in command in Cobb County in the Sheriff's Department. And what he was offering me, he said, look, at the time, they didn't have a dental office in-house. Cobb County didn't, for the prisoners. So he said, look, we can bring them to you, and we pay full price. I said, that sounds good to me. Sign me up. So anyway, I started working on the prisoners, and I'm not sure, and this is a crazy story. So working on the prisoners, and one day, 3 prisoners came in, 2 guards, okay? Both carrying .357 Magnums, guards. So the first person comes back. I know his name. His name is Raymond Franklin. And he sat down in my chair, and I was examining, and he had a cavity on a front tooth. So I gave him some Novocaine up there to numb the tooth. So they got handcuffs on. So he's going to the reception area. There's a guard at my door, and then there's a guard at the reception area. Well, the guard at the reception area had his back turned. So he just reached in and grabbed his gun and pulled it out and got the drop on the other guard. So we're all prisoners. This is not a good situation. And so the first thing Raymond Franklin did, I'll go over to Paul and show you. He came over to me, he took the barrel of the gun and put it right between my eyes. He said, I'm going to kill you. Everybody hear that? So, he's got a .357 Magnum in his hand. He puts it between my eyes and says, I'm going to kill you. Now, if I was the size of this gentleman right here, I would have tried to take that gun away from him. But since most girls are stronger than me, I thought better of that. So I knew I had to say a quick prayer. I said a 3-word prayer because I thought I was going to be dead if I tried to say any more. You know what I mean? I didn't say it out loud, but I said, God save me. So, he still had the gun between my eyes. Then he lowered it. And then he asked me to go around, pull the phones out of the wall, because these are escaped convicts now. And I didn't know this till later, but this guy was in for attempted murder, who took the guns away and who came to me and said, I'm going to kill you. So you're going to find out later, he would have killed me. So, So he's given me orders to go around and do things in the office, right? So then he has us all go spread eagle in the carpet. We had the old shag carpet back in the 70s, right? So we're all like this, the guards, me, and one of my employees. I only had one employee. And she's like this too. So he comes over to me and he says, hey, Doc. I said, what do you want? He says, I want the keys to your car. Why did he want those? It's a getaway car, right? So I said, well, they're in my office on my desk. Go get them. He said, no, you go get them. So I got up. Let's see if I can show you here. I had keys about 10 times more than this on my ring at the time. Why I had so many keys, I don't know. But I'm glad I did. Kind of. So he went out to my car, dragging my assistant with a gun at her side. Okay? So he gets to the car. Now, they're kind of nervous, right? They're escaped convicts. So he's going through my keys, trying to figure out which one fits. He thinks I've given him the wrong keys, deliberately. So he tells my assistant, I'm going to go in and kill Dr. Busch. So I got 5 seconds to live. But something happened just then. He opened the back door to come in, and he was going to kill me. And he heard something. What did he hear? Sirens. So he got scared. I never actually saw him, but he was only 5 seconds away from me. And so he grabbed my assistant, took her hostage, ran through the woods. In the first house he came to, he banged on the door very vehemently, right? A man comes to the door. He said, give me the keys to your car. The man says, F you, and slams the door in his face. He shoots through the door and kills him. Do you think he would have killed me? Yeah. So, a lot happened there. As soon as he broke down the door then, after he shot through the door, the convict, and then found him dead and released my assistant temporarily. So she took off running. And by the time he realized that she was a long ways off, he took one shot at her but did not hit her. So she was able to get to safety because her life could have been gone as well. So anyhow, this all happened about 10:30 in the morning. So the police are all over the place. They have to shut down the schools. There's a school within 1 minute driving and probably even closer walking because you just go through the woods. And so they shut down all the schools and so forth. And so they have a total manhunt for this guy. They can't find him because it starts raining. So there's no scent or anything the dogs can follow and so forth. So anyhow, it gets kind of late that evening, so I decide I'm going to go home, right? So I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I remembered if I locked my door or not at the office. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should go back and check it out. I'm glad I didn't. Guess what happened? He got out from under the boat. It was pitch black, dark, and he got disoriented. He came right back to my front door in the office. So I might have met him there. That was not a good situation. So I had a Wendy's that was probably from here to Lucian there. And he saw a lady there in a car, so we went over and held the gun on her and said, look, I want your car. She took off, probably saved her life. And so he ran across the street, the police were called, they caught him. But it isn't over till it's over. So there was a trial in Macon because his attorney said he couldn't get a fair trial in Atlanta. So we had a trial. I had to testify. Of course, the biggest witness was my assistant that saw him kill the man. Okay? So, we were both on the witness stand and so forth. I don't even remember. It's kind of a blur, really. But so they find him guilty and sentence him to death. Is that logical? He's an escaped convict, kills someone, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, guess what? The judge messed up. Whatever they do to the jury, I forget what it's called. They do something to the... Pardon? No? No, they charge the jury. It's charging. Okay. So when he charges the jury, he makes a mistake. The judge does. So guess what happens? The trial gets thrown out. We got to start all over. So we go through the whole process again. This time, unfortunately, there's a different outcome. He's found guilty of murder, but no death penalty. Which means he's up for parole, I think it was 30 years. Now, you know how good behavior and that kind of stuff, you can't trust our prisons, all right? So, about 30 years later, I'm almost ready to retire. I get a call from the sheriff's office. It's the deputy that was there that day when those prisoners escaped. And he said, I'm getting ready to retire in 2 months. I thought you need to know something. I said, what is that? Raymond Franklin's getting out today. I said, no, he's not. So I called the district attorney. I became friends with the district attorney. He was also married to an Adventist girl. Okay, so he was at our church some in Marietta. And I know him now as well. But he's more of a recluse now. But anyhow, so... forget where I was there. Yeah, thank you. So Franklin, so I called Tom, and he was now the head district attorney of all the district attorneys in the U.S. So he had a big job. So he left Cobb County and took that job. I said, Tom, Franklin's getting out today. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He said, no, he's not. I'm flying down there right now. So he flew down to wherever the prison was in South Georgia, kept him in. And there's other charges that they didn't charge him on because they thought he was going to be either given the death penalty or put away forever. So they resurrected those charges and so forth as well. So anyhow, so it's a complicated situation. But he's still trying to get out. And I'm trying to keep him in. And there's only one other person beside me that's trying to keep him in. Even the family of the murdered man gave up. Because it's a drag after a while. They keep having these, whatever you call them, probation hearings. And so we have to keep going to those and so forth. So anyhow, it's a very difficult scenario. I got some more stuff here to go, so let me keep going. So the bottom line is he's still in jail right now. He could get out. I don't know. And I know my assistant has been trained with a pistol now. If he comes after her, she's going to get some lead. She's going to give him some lead. Now, I don't have a gun, so I'm not worried about him anyway, because I know somebody that's more powerful than all the guns in the world. Okay, so where am I here? Okay, so this is after this now. My children were reaching high school age, okay? And I had been chairman of the board of the Marietta School for 8 years, okay? And so because of that, I got some recognition from the academy, and some of the people there wanted me then to take over the chairmanship of the academy, okay, which is a much bigger deal, because you have 11 churches you've got to deal with. So at the Marietta church, I had one church I had to deal with. Well, there I had 11. That's a lot of fun. So anyhow, so I told them I would do it. So I took over the chairmanship of Atlanta Adventist Academy. And it was a good thing, except I wasn't totally with Jesus, so my sports thing was a little out to lunch, so to speak. And, I was kind of in favor of sports at that time, so we had some great sports teams. And especially the boys' basketball was unbelievable. But anyhow, I would take a different stance towards that now because I know different. But the kids enjoyed it. You cannot believe how the school spirit was during that particular time when my son was there and my daughter was there and so forth. So, we had to play a school named Berean. Have you ever heard of them? Huh? The very first year, when my son was a freshman, he was the point guard. They beat us 2 times. We had to play them 2 times. After that, they never won again. Now that's saying something. They had people like McKinney. Do you know that name, McKinney? McKinney? Now he's older now. He'll be 50 like my son is now. And so him and a guy named Carlton and just some tough dudes. And we had one black kid, his name was Raymond, and he was a great player. He was a great player. So we had a lot of good players, and so we were able to beat them 3 years in a row, which was pretty amazing after we've been stomped for so many years. But anyhow, so it was good for the school spirit and so forth, but that's still not what God wants us to do. So I would handle that differently now. All right. Okay, so the next thing that happens here, I got to keep going, don't I? Oh, boy. I'm seeing patients one day, and the very first patient I see is a guy named Tony Blackwood. And I know Tony a little bit because he's been a patient for a couple of years, right? He's a preacher. And he's a preacher of a church of God. Okay? So I go in to check his teeth one morning. He said, before you check my teeth, I need to ask you something. I said, what's that? He said, I want you to preach at my church. I couldn't even speak. I just looked down and didn't say anything for the next 5 minutes. Why? Do you know, if you haven't been up in front of a microphone like this, how scared you can be? Okay? So I was scared to death of going to his church and preaching. But I knew, because it wasn't an Adventist preacher, that God had something to do with this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. So God knew how to work around me, okay? So I didn't say yes right then because I couldn't speak, literally. And he says, I tell you what, after a dead silence for 5 minutes, He says, I tell you what, I'll be back in 2 weeks to get my son clean. I'll give you the preaching date. Still couldn't speak. So when I went home, I realized that, hey, this is God asking me to do this, not this man. So when I knew that, I knew I couldn't say no. There was another reason I couldn't say no. About 6 months before, I'd done something I'd never before in my life. I told God I was all in. And you can't be all in and say no there. So I was stuck. So when he came back the next time, I told him I would do it. So I started working on a sermon. It's probably my most pitiful sermon ever. And so I started working on it, and this was going to be a Thanksgiving weekend. There were a lot of people there. We got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I started preaching at 2 p.m. What happened to me during those hours? Nerves. You got that right. It was killing me. I mean, I can't even explain the pain and anxiety I was feeling hanging around there knowing I got this coming up. So anyhow, he could see that I was having a hard time, and he says, look, it'll feel so good once you're done. And I thought, yeah, once I'm done. So anyhow, so we're on the platform, and he gets up and he said, I want to introduce Dr. Busch to you. He's my dentist, blah, blah, blah. And he's going to be the preacher today. And I looked around and I saw 2 openings in the back walls that I could have got serious, that I could escape. I mean, you have to be in this situation to understand this anxiety. Okay, and I'm thinking, I could run out there and be gone before anybody even hardly realized it. The only problem was I had my wife in the audience. I had her mother in the audience. And she's going to be embarrassed, blah, 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 blah. So I decided to stay and preach. It wasn't a great sermon, but I got through it. And I did feel so good once it was done. Now, interestingly enough, I tried to call him the other day. Because once I finished preaching, he told me something. He says, you can come back anytime and preach. Of course, I didn't want to hear that then. But now I do. I'll go back and preach 10, 15 times. But now I don't know how to get a hold of him, so I'm having a hard time trying to do that. So, now, one more thing here. I'm about an hour now. So I retired in 2009, okay, after 33 years in dentistry. I only retired because somebody came in one day that I knew. He used to go to this church. His name is Chris Holland. Anybody ever heard the name Chris Holland? Several people have heard it, right? So Chris Holland just walks into my office and says, I got somebody who wants to buy your office. I said, it's not for sale. Are you kidding me? I never even thought about selling it. But anyhow, so I listened to it, right? I listen. So the more I listened about it, I mean, I was 60 years old, I think, or 59 at the time. So that's actually kind of young to retire in dentistry. But although I had a friend that retired at 44, and he's got $8 million in the bank right now. But he pinches pennies, and I don't do that. So I go through my money like it's going out of style. But anyhow, so after I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe I should just see what they got to say. So my son's an attorney. I got him involved and so forth. And so we came to an agreement. And so I'd heard of other cases where people sold it and then the dentist never really paid them. so there are a lot of bad things. So I said, look, you got to give me 90% of the money up front, and then you give me 10% over the next 2 years. He said, okay. I said, okay. But I wanted to stay and work for a couple of years because, I'm still pretty young, right? So we had an agreement where I would work for 3 years. The only problem is I've not had a boss before. I don't do well with bosses. Especially when I know more than the boss does. So we got into, I always like to use specialists. In other words, what I did in my dentistry was crown and bridge, you know what the crowns are and bridges are, and fillings. The other $2 million, I gave it out. The root canals, the dentures, the orthodontics, the gum treatment. I didn't do any of that because I had a setup. I knew how to do this. So I had 14 employees when I moved to my new office. There's not a dentist in the world that's one dentist that has 14 full-time employees. Why did I have that? To take care of my patients. We gave the best dentistry in the world in Marietta, Georgia. And that's the way it was going to be. So if I had 2 people out for the day, I never even noticed it. Let's say 2 people were sick. Because I was overstaffed every single day. And I did that by design. Now, does that cost you something? Who cares? I'm not worried about money. I'm worried about what? Patient care, taking care of the patients. And the patients realized that, and we couldn't get rid of them. I kid you not. So they loved this big time. But my staff was unbelievable. I mean, my team, nobody could beat it. And so really that was kind of the secret. And of course, the head guy's got to, demand certain things. But after a while, they knew that the way I wanted to do it was best for the patients, and they bought into that. They said, yeah, we want to do a good job too, the best we can. So that's the way our office ran. But what happened was, I got off a little bit there. What happened was, I got to say a little bit more about that picture in a minute. Forgot what I was saying. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So anyhow, thank you. I do have some mental issues, don't I? It's bad being old. You know that. I'm 75 going on 105 right now. So he started firing my employees one by one. You have no idea. And you know why he did that? Because I paid him the most of anybody in Atlanta. And he wanted cheap people. Cheap people don't have the skills or the personality or whatever else you need to run a good dental office. So he started firing them one by one. This was not my son. This was the guy I sold it to. So he became my boss, right? I never really had a boss in a long time, and I don't ever want one again. Are you listening, Elder Sykes? No. I'm teasing. Chandra got it. Okay, so so I always sent my root canals out to a specialist, not just a specialist, but the best one I could find. So he said, no, we're not going to send the root canals out anymore. We're going to let this young lady who's just out of school, we're going to let her do the root canals. I said, I can't do that. So I kept sending him to my person. He came to me in about a week and he says, listen, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to change your mind, or I'm going to fire you. So 2 weeks came, and he says, have you changed your mind? I said, no, absolutely not. He says, you're done. So he turned around and left. You know what I did? I started skipping down the hall celebrating. Literally. Thank God I'm going to be rid of this man. Okay, because he didn't do the things the right way. So anyhow, so that was the name of that situation. Now, I just want to do one more thing here. I know people may be getting a little tired, but this is about after I retired. I retired in 2009 because I got fired from my own office. Figure that out a minute, right? And so in 2010, started looking for land. What does the Spirit of Prophecy say about living in the city? What? Get out, huh? Well, you got to get out of the city no matter what. Even if your own little house is an outpost, a small outpost. You understand what I'm saying? So if you live in the city, and I'm speaking to everyone here now, if you live in a subdivision, you're going to die in that subdivision. I'm not joking. I'm 100% sure of that in my own mind. Okay? I've read some books on country living and so forth that have said that as well. And I don't know that Ellen White said that then, because I don't even know they had subdivisions back then. They might, a city probably they existed, but I don't know about subdivisions outside the city. So the point of it is, I decided I need to get out of the city. Now, of course, when I came to Atlanta in 1975, what should I have done? Go to the country then. Once you get hooked on the city and that income, I probably made 5 to 10 times the income I would have at an LJ. Okay? I did a lot of good things with that money. You know, help the school, help the church, help the academy, but still, you're putting yourself at risk. And so I made a mistake. So I realized that later, and then I told my wife, I said, we got to get out of here. I've really messed up. So we started looking for land, right? So the real estate agent I found was actually in LJ, although I was looking everywhere from Jasper to Blue Ridge area. And so we probably looked at 10 or 15 different places the real estate person showed me. There weren't any of them any good. Now, we were looking for 10 acres. And so she kept calling me, and we kept looking. She kept calling me, and we'd go out and look. And then one day she calls me, and she says, you know, you need to really come look at this piece of property I've got. And I said, well, how many acres is it? She says 128. She says, you need to come look. I looked at it that day. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, that was the time right after the 2009 recession, or whenever it was, 8, 9. Prices had done what? Okay, but this was 128 acres at the time. I ended up selling 10, so it's 118 now. But back then it was 128. So I couldn't get over how beautiful this land was. I mean, God had led me right to this property. And God's been working with me since before I was born. And with everybody here as well. Okay, you need to know that. So anyhow, so the bank had it for sale for $424,000, which was 75% off the price of 2 years previously. And I thought, this is a great deal. I'm going to write a check. I had the money in the bank. So I went to the real estate agent. I got out my checkbook. And I started to write the check. And then I stopped. I needed more. What's the word I want to use? yeah, I needed to know from God, even though I'm praying the whole time. God, you've got to really make this plain to me. I mean, I wanted this land so bad I couldn't even stand it. Okay, but God knew that, so He's testing me. So I told my wife, let's put out a fleece. Okay? Never done a fleece before, so I decided to do a money fleece. Not that I wanted it any cheaper, but that was an easy thing to do because I was told the bank wouldn't lower their price. So I said, let's do a money fleece. And my wife said, yeah, let's do that. So we did a money fleece, and so we put the amount, this gets crazy. We put the amount at $360,000. They were at $424,000. They said they wouldn't come down. Okay? We're going to see, right? So the real estate agent calls me after a couple of months. She said, there's a new price. I said, what is it? $464,000. They went up on the price. And I said, well, maybe God doesn't want me to have this, right? So a couple of months later, she called me. They got a new price that came down to $404,000. I said, that's great. That's what I'm not looking for, though. So anyhow, it goes a couple of months again. Now, there are people looking at this property, and this is as pristine a property as you'll ever see, right? And I'm thinking, somebody's going to grab this. But God had His hand over that property, so nobody would buy it. And so she calls me a couple months later, and she says, there's a new price. I said, what is it? She said, $365,000. What's my price? $360,000. Now let me tell you something. God is testing me to no end here. All right, all of my friends are saying, go ahead and buy it. You're only $5,000. Real estate agent said, you're only $5,000 off. I said, you don't understand. This is not my fleece. Okay. I don't remember. I think maybe I did, and they said no. I think I did do that. Excuse me, because it's been a while. All right. So anyhow, I kept going on and on and on. Right. So I didn't hear anything for about 3 months. I'm getting ready. 3 months later, she calls me. She said, there's a new price. $225,000. You see what God? You see what He was doing? I couldn't believe it. So what was God telling me? He's speaking. What is He saying? Saying what? Yeah. He says, because you were faithful, I'm going to give you a $200,000 more discount on this. However, I didn't write the check for $225,000. I'm a business person. What do I know is going on? I'm probably not the only one that's going to put a bid on this. So I decided to write the check for $230,000 to try to edge out somebody that might do $225,000. So they took my check. So God is good. Now, what am I going to do with this property? I'm going to give it all away. I'm in the process of that right now. Not to the church, because I'm doing something with the outpost center there. Okay? So we will start an operation similar to Uchee Pines and Wildwood is the deal. So this all will go out. I will give away my house as well as the land. Did God know I was going to do that? So He didn't have a hard time lowering that price, did He? Anyhow, so you see what can happen. I don't know what to say, but we have to stay in prayer. We have to stay with God constantly. Hey, I'm not the best example. I mean, I'm telling you a lot of good things that I did, but you heard some bad things to begin with, didn't you? Didn't you? Okay, so, I've done a lot of sinning in my lifetime. But guess what? Jesus is on the doorstep. How much sinning is he going to permit us to do? How much? How much? What? None. So it's got to be gone. Hey, I've still got work to do in my heart. And there's not a lot of time left to get to zero sin. What about you? All right. I appreciate your patience in listening to this. And hopefully you gained some insight into this today. So we'll start closing up here, okay?